In the summer of 1938, Joseph P. Kennedy, the American ambassador to Great Britain, came home to New England. He had lunched the day before with President Roosevelt and shared a dish of strawberries with Eleanor. Reporters were asking about his own presidential ambitions. Kennedy, at 50, son of an Irish saloon keeper from East Boston, one of the nation's richest and most powerful men, had a lot to be happy about, but not enough.
Wherever Joe had gone, power was all that mattered. And the artifice that surrounded it, the wealth that underpinned it, couldn't hide that reality.
Mr. Kennedy, have you anything to say for it?
Nothing to say until I've seen the president.
All right, let's get going, boys. I want to go home.
He chased money and was not always so ethical in the acquiring. He chased success and made political mischief. It is very moving to see people who aggress against the world and who want so much and who commit so much of their energies and their gifts and their time to getting it.
By that same summer of 1938, Eugene O'Neill, celebrated playwright of New England, its foggy coasts and derelicts, had started work on the most extravagant project of his career. After years of success on Broadway, he had just received the only Nobel Prize ever given to an American dramatist. O'Neill, like Joe Kennedy, was a 50-year-old Irish American, and he too had won honors that were beyond the dreams of most ambitious men, but not enough.
There was a long period of silence, about 13 years, when he didn't produce anything. And he was working his way in, I think, to understanding himself in relationship to his family and to his Irish roots.
At the heart of O'Neill's tragedies is the sense that we go through these elaborate measures of trying to get rid of the past, and in the end, it overwhelms us. If we're becoming something, we're losing something.
Both Kennedy and O'Neill were the grandsons of famine immigrants and men of monumental will. By the reach of their imagination, they stirred up powerful and conflicting impulses among the Irish in America. The ambassador would draw them forward to their dreams of wealth and power. The playwright would issue a warning. Beware, Irish dreamers, your dreams might come true. In Boston, the dreams of the Irish had been held in check longer than anywhere in America. But here, for better or worse, they most dramatically came true.
Midnight, you heavy laden, it's midnight. Come on and trade in your old dreams for new, and your new dreams for old. I know where they're bought, and I know where they're sold. Midnight, you gotta get there at midnight, and you'll be met there by others like you, brothers as blue, smiling on the street of dreams.
I was born in 1935. Both of my parents were born in Ireland. We owned a house in South Boston. It was a 3-decker. It was very small for really 11 people. But we didn't know. We thought it was great. I remember my sister Peggy. She was telling one of my brothers, you know what they said today in school? They said that South Boston is a ghetto. She just didn't get that, you know what I mean? And that was like an insult.
It was mostly Irish families, and we lived on a street with 158 children. And above us was people from the west of Ireland and a border, and they all spoke Irish. Sometimes it did feel a bit like very deep poverty, the smell of cabbage and, you know, the kind of crammed conditions.
We walked, took the streetcar every place we went. The first dance you ever went to was Down in St. Augustine School Hall where the nuns made sure you kept, the Holy Ghost between you and the girl you were trying to dance with. None of us knew how to dance.
I remember my mother saying, try not to be too much like everybody here. She'd say, you can't just associate with these people from Ireland. And I hate to say it now, but she said they were thick mix. She was trying to struggle up.
On the street of dreams, gold, silver and gold, all you can hold.
Boston in 1938 was a city frozen in time. The Irish had taken over City Hall, but a Yankee elite, the Brahmins of Back Bay and Beacon Hill, still controlled access to the higher circles of life. The Boston Irish were a people apart. They clung to their old world pessimism and their memories of Yankee oppression.
It was us against all the Protestants. It was just literally, they don't like us because we're Catholics and we're Irish, and we don't like them because they're Protestants. And it was that simple.
Somebody described the Irish family structure as a hill fort. The whole community was inside the fort. They were impregnable against the world. And then when they came out, you'd be out in the world, and then you'd have to take your chances.
Irish kids fought turf wars with Italians from the North End and Jews on Blue Hill Avenue.
I dared you.
Their parents in these Depression years tuned in to the radio priest, Father Coughlin, who stirred the pot of anti-Semitism.
Would drive the money changers from the temple.
Sundays, they bought his paper, Social Justice, on the steps of Catholic churches. In an angry world, the church was a rock of comfort.
The church was your security. You know what I mean? And whenever there's a problem in the family that your parents couldn't handle, they'd go to the priest and say, well, Father, what should we do about this?
If a man didn't go to church, he was not recognized as a good, upstanding citizen in the community. The whole thing revolved around the church. That was an extension of the family living room, the family hearth.
People were proud of how close the community was. They had that sense that, hey, we're a little bit different here. We're really tight. It was a very small area to be in. And you didn't have to do a lot of thinking about what you were going to do. There was very little for you to do.
In 1938, it was still easy to take a job on the city with the promise of a safe paycheck and a pension down the road. But for the ambitious ones, the mythic story of the Irish as underdogs was a challenge that aroused extravagant longings to beat the Yankees at their own game. No Boston Irishman took up this challenge as relentlessly or with such consequence as Joseph P. Kennedy.
Joe wanted the same things, the same prizes, with a fierce intensity that the Yankees had always taken. He said, I was born here, my children were born here, what the hell do I have to do to be an American?
In 1909, when he went to Harvard, it was enemy territory for the Boston Irish. But Joe Kennedy was immensely popular, a leader of his class. In his innocence, he hoped to be tapped for one of Harvard's elite clubs, extensions of New England's Brahmin society. After he was blackballed by the Porcellian Club, he never forgot it. He shaped a career as an Irish Horatio Alger, an aggressive outsider making his way in the world. By 25, he was the country's youngest bank president. Within a year, he'd married the mayor's daughter and set up house in a Yankee suburb.
Joe Kennedy dragged his coat behind him, hoping someone would step on it and he could get in a fight with him. He had a swagger that was admired by some and despised by the Wasps because he was beating them at their own game.
The Yankees were always a convenient scapegoat. I mean, there was a Yankee lobbyist here years ago who gave him a job at the Bethlehem shipyard in Quincy. Another Yankee bade him and brought him into his financial house. So if it wasn't for the Yankees, Joe Kennedy would not have achieved as much as he did in this city.
He was a tough, smart schemer. He took on Wall Street, he took on the liquor industry, he took on booze smugglers, he took on Hollywood. He knew how to do things through the back door to put in the fix, to use his money. He could play by the Marquis of Queensberry rules, or he could, go behind the barn and beat you any way he could beat you.
No hide-bound Bostonian tied to class and place, Kennedy followed the money. A streak of Irish pessimism bred in the bones drove him on. Plenty was never enough. "My husband changes jobs so fast," his wife Rose liked to say. "I simply never knew what business he was in."
Joe Kennedy never had a business. Joe Kennedy did not want to own a firm or run a firm or be responsible for anything but himself. His only business was his family.
His family was his fortress, and to it he brought his plunder. Behind its walls, the ruthless businessman and philandering husband was a loving and solicitous parent. Like an Irish tribe, the family was bound in absolute loyalty to one another, wary of outsiders. The Kennedy family, Joe once proclaimed, was the world's most exclusive club.
My mother and father knew who Joe Kennedy was. You know what I mean? They say, "Oh, the big guy, wow, an Irish guy with a lot of money, one of the richest guys in America." He even talks to the president. He talks to President Roosevelt and guys like that.
Joe piled up his money because he thought money was power. During the Depression, power shifted from Wall Street to Washington, and Kennedy followed. He made himself a friend and confidant of the president. They had a lot in common. Two outsized men who relished horseplay, gossip, and power. But Roosevelt was wary of Joe as a possible presidential rival, and Joe's loyalty was mixed with his own raw hunger.
He made no bones about what he wanted. He wanted to be appointed the first Irish Catholic ambassador to the court of St. James. No one had crossed that barrier. Joe wanted to be the first.
Just arrived in England after a very pleasant trip. I'm looking forward with great anticipation to my duties here.
London was the most sensitive and prestigious post in Europe. And in that gray city, the Kennedys were fresh air.
This is my first trip to Europe, and I was very excited. I couldn't even sleep last night.
Bye, Rosie.
Bye, Jack.
What? That's enough.
The press followed this handsome and boisterous family everywhere, riding in Hyde Park, attending the Derby at Epsom Downs, and the matches at Wimbledon. Joe Jr. and Jack were dispatched like young princes through Europe to learn the ways of diplomats. Their sisters were presented at court.
Outside his London home, Mr. Joseph P. Kennedy poses for the news cameras before driving in semi-state to Buckingham Palace to be received by His Majesty the King. All this is a new and thrilling experience for America's big man of business, who is also President Roosevelt's great personal friend.
One night, when Joe and Rose Kennedy were guests of the king at Windsor Castle, Joe turned to Rose and said, "Well, Rosie, this is a hell of a long way from East Boston, isn't it?"
Here was old Joe, the saloon keeper's kid, in with the stripy pants set and the starchy diplomats and aristocracy and royalty. And he loved the royal family, apparently. He was very chummy with them, found them delightful.
But he was still basically a tough guy, and maybe perhaps a little rough around the edges, but that's what made Joe Kennedy, Joe Kennedy. For the ambassador to the court of St. James from the United States of America to put his feet up on a desk is unheard of. But I think the average person in London or Boston or wherever they were got a kick out of it. This is the kind of a guy that he came back after a session with the Queen and he announced that she was quite a cute trick. I mean, I think that's beautiful.
Must have had a great time getting that up on that ladder.
Kennedy was warned by his friends that he was getting in over his head.
Who's going to give me the sign?
He did not have the background. He was not a diplomat. And yet such was his sense that he could carry everything before him with his charm, with his glib manner, that he went charging ahead.
The Kennedys, once barred from Boston's best clubs, were taken in as weekend guests at Cliveden, Lady Astor's country house. Cliveden was the center of aristocratic support for the policy of appeasing Hitler. Joe had always, in his buccaneering business life, been ahead of the curve. He had an uncanny knack for seeing the future and was not afraid to gamble on his hunches. Now, without the backing of the president, he sided with the Cliveden set, gambled on the hunch that Hitler was a man you could do business with. When war came in September 1939, the ambassador called Roosevelt in tears. "It's the end of the world," he cried again and again, "the end of everything." As the months passed, ignored by his president, Kennedy's despair hardened to anger.
The story of Joe Kennedy's problem with Roosevelt starts with an interview right here at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel with Louis Lyons, who was a reporter for the Globe. And Joe Kennedy's story was that it was off the record. Louis Lyons' story was that it was all on the record.
In the reassuring luxury of the Ritz, Kennedy was his old self. He'd built a career on interviews like this. Striding about the room, suspenders drooping at his side, he brought the reporter into his confidence.
And Joe Kennedy said some of the damnedest things that any ambassador had ever said. He says, democracy is finished in England, and it will be here too if war comes to us.
It was bad news for Joe Kennedy because it was way out of bounds for Roosevelt, and the ambassador had to cash it in at that point.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
Here is what has happened. President Roosevelt...
By December 7th, 1941, Kennedy was in disgrace. He was now marked as an appeaser.
This means that war is under...
Down at his Palm Beach villa, he could only listen to the news on the radio.
And he sent a wire to the White House saying, in this great crisis, all Americans are with you. I want to serve. Name the front on which I can serve. There wasn't any response. And then he got the message. Roosevelt wanted no part of him. He was on the sidelines for the duration.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
As the years passed, it became clear that he was finished. This relentlessly ambitious man then focused his attention on his sons. They would carry his hopes forward.
San Francisco. The Army and Navy went on a war basis on the Pacific seaboard today. All these were canceled, all furloughs revoked, and every man was ordered to report to his station.
Across the continent, another celebrated Irish American sat evenings listening to the radio. Eugene O'Neill, the country's foremost playwright, was also facing a crisis. His hands shook from a degenerative nervous disease. He knew his writing days were numbered.
Lockheed talking from the newsroom of the White House.
O'Neill's troubles were more than physical. After years of success, his Broadway career had soured. Younger playwrights were stealing the limelight.
For the latest news on the Pacific situation.
But O'Neill was as ruthless in his aspirations as Joe Kennedy. While Kennedy continued to plot the future, O'Neill was ransacking the past.
Carlotta O'Neill described the struggle O'Neill had. It was complicated by the fact that he had very bad periods of illness when he really couldn't write. And also World War II was on, and they would listen to Hitler's speeches and get horrified by what he was saying. He decided that Broadway was just show shop and that it didn't deserve him. So he retreated from New York, and he said he was not going to have any more productions.
O'Neill literally went into exile and set himself up in this almost monastic existence. He conceived this vast cycle of 11 plays that were going to tell the history of not only the Irish experience in America, but of the American experience.
The theme of it was, what shall it profit a man if he win the whole world and lose his soul?
O'Neill set the cycle in New England, where growing up, he had seen the Yankees and Irish locked in their dance of rejection and resentment. He never could finish this grandiose work, but in the course of his searching, memories came flooding back of his own family's past.
Out of the wreckage of this cycle, O'Neill wrote A Long Day's Journey into Night. It tells us so much about the Irish in America, their haunted past.
He really closed himself in with his ghosts, as he put it himself, been pulled out of his entrails in pain and suffering. The story of his family.
He wept as he wrote it. All the memories that haunted him all his life were focused on that play.
When I was 10, my father deserted my mother and went back to Ireland to die. My mother was left a stranger in a strange land with 4 small children. There was no damn romance in our poverty.
Starting at 8 o'clock in the morning and ending at midnight, he was condensing a family's tragedy that went back many, many years with seeds that started in Ireland. He took one day to expose the sins of that family.
In the life of his own family, O'Neill found the history of the Irish-American rise from poverty and the price to be paid for that rise. The story begins just after the famine. O'Neill's grandfather, Edward, stepped off the boat in 1856. His sons still dressed in the Irish flannel skirts, worn by peasants to ward off evil fairies.
He was a typical famine Irishman. He had nothing behind him, as a saying of the Irish, and he couldn't figure out what to do in this country.
He couldn't make the transfer. He just didn't feel at home here. And he abandoned his family, which was also a kind of common experience in the post-famine Irish immigrant population, and went back to Ireland to die.
So that James O'Neill, the father of Eugene O'Neill, then became the sole support of this family at 10 years old.
It was at home that I first learned the value of $1 and the fear of the poorhouse. I've never been able to believe in my luck since.
By the time he was 30, this hungry son of an Irish domestic had made himself, by ferocious self-discipline, into a national celebrity, a matinee idol in theaters from coast to coast.
James O'Neill came across this play, The Count of Monte Cristo. It was the creakiest old melodrama you've ever seen, about this guy that's locked up in a castle for 100 years and finally gets out, and so forth. Absolute theatrical junk. But he was a marvelous Count of Monte Cristo. So he bought the rights to the play, and he proceeded to play this part for the rest of his life.
Before he knew what was happening to him, he had really lost his great talent, and he couldn't play anything else but a conventional melodrama anymore. He had been trapped by this role. He used to call it his good bad luck.
That goddamn play I bought for a song made such a great success and a great money success. It ruined me with its promise of an easy fortune. What the hell was it I wanted to buy? I wonder. It was worth. Well, no matter. It's a late day for regrets.
The playwright remembered that his father's good luck in the theater was nothing but bad luck at home. The family's New England cottage, the setting of Long Day's Journey, was a house divided against itself. The Count of Monte Cristo was an embarrassment to his 2 boys. Sophisticated, up-to-date, they mocked their father, laughed at the old-fashioned melodramas to which he'd given his life. And his wife, Ella, was a bitter woman. James, the ambitious immigrant, had married above himself.
Please don't blame your father, Edmund. He didn't know any better. His people were the most ignorant kind of poverty-stricken Irish.
Ella Quinlan fell helplessly in love with James, but she always felt superior to him. She patronized him, and she always basically inwardly thought of him as an Irish peasant.
The summer will soon be over, thank goodness. Your season will open again, and we can go back to second-rate hotels and trains. I hate them too, but at least I don't expect them to be like a home. This was never a home. You've always preferred the club or the barroom. And as for me, it's always been as lonely as a dirty room in a one-night-stand hotel. A real home is never lonely. You forget, I know from experience what a real home is like. I gave one up to marry you. My father's home.
Long Day's Journey into Night is a great human drama, but it's also a very particular Irish-American drama. And they've moved towards, the mother, what she's moving towards, this world of gentility, of middle-class acceptance, which she can never really reach. She's never going to get there. The shadow constantly hangs over them of the past, of what they are. They're Irish, and they can't escape that.
The past is the present, isn't it? It's the future, too. We all try to lie out of that, but life won't let us.
He would go into his study in the morning and come out in the afternoon looking 10 years older and absolutely exhausted and drained. The years of destructive living were finally catching up with him. He was an old man in his 50s.
The anguish of the play comes out of the life of the playwright. His life completes the family story. Hung on the walls of his study were mementos of his wild youth, when he fled his family's immigrant home and its lace-curtain respectability. As he wrote, he could see the proof that he was once an able-bodied seaman on a square rigger, working his way to Buenos Aires. These were the years of his rebellion, when he abandoned his own young wife and child and made his home in waterfront bars and brothels.
He wandered around the world. He lived in absolute degradation in various cities, drank himself into insensibility night after night. In a sense, you'd almost think trying to commit suicide on the installment plan.
The wandering years were brought to an end by a bout of tuberculosis in 1912. In the solitude of a hospital, he began writing plays. Within a decade, he had won a Pulitzer and a reputation as the one-time down-and-outer who created works of high art. He became a cultural hero, the man who lifted Broadway from the crass commercialism of his father's day.
He was creating himself, creating a persona that was extremely attractive, but not necessarily true to himself.
You're the top. You're an arrow collar. You're the top.
He was so popular and so controversial that Cole Porter wrote him into You're the Top.
You're an O'Neill drama. You're Whistler's mama. You're Camembert. But if, baby, I'm the bottom, you're the top.
Play after play, condemning the greedy makers of fortune, earned him the good fortune to buy a Bugatti and a chateau in the Loire Valley next to the Prince of Wales. Like his father, he was an American success. Like his father, he wondered whether it was all worthwhile. After the Nobel Prize, he turned his back on Broadway. Years of silence followed. He looked back at the family's turbulent passage from Irish peasant to Nobel laureate. Long Day's Journey was an Irishman's lament for what was lost along the way.
What is it I'm looking for? I know it's something I lost. Something I miss terribly. I know it can't be altogether lost. Something I need terribly. I remember when I had it, I was never lonely or afraid. I can't have lost it forever.
He wanted to get away from everything that family represented at a certain stage of his early life. And then he discovers that
The most powerful part of himself was this story of the family, because it's him. He gave a lifetime of thought and experience and put it into this one play.
For all O'Neill's obsession with the past, the play points forward to a time decades ahead when the Irish will leave their neighborhoods behind to step into the larger, if lonelier, American world. In Long Day's journey, there are no Irish uncles or aunts, no friendly neighbors, no priests or politicians to lend a helping hand. The family lives apart in a place called nowhere. After 5 years of intense labor, O'Neill's health was broken. He had written The Iceman Cometh, Long Day's Journey into Night, and Moon for the Misbegotten, Irish masterpieces, the work for which he would be remembered. By 1944, his hands were shaking so badly, he put his pencil down and never wrote again. Lieutenant John F. Kennedy had drifted right by the little island. He stopped trying to swim. He seemed to stop caring. His body drifted through the wet hours, and he was very cold. Early in the morning, the sky turned from black to gray, and so did Kennedy's mind. Light came to both at about 6. Joe Kennedy never made it to the war, but his sons did, and he wanted to be sure the world knew about it. When a Japanese destroyer rammed PT Boat 109, commanded by Jack Kennedy, his father jumped on the opportunity. He got his friends at Reader's Digest to reprint the New Yorker magazine's vivid account. The ambassador was looking to the future. The war was changing America, breaking down the ethnic fences. The Johnny who came marching home would not be the one who left.
The experience of going to the flight line at 3 a.m. in the morning, flying 35 missions over Germany, had an impact on you. When you came back from that kind of experience, you were changed. I mean, we knew what we wanted, and we were bent on getting it.
Every time I came on the ship, the USS Topeka, I stopped and turned to the fantail and saluted the flag. You were constantly reminded that you were an American. I succeeded in the U.S. Navy. I mean, I was accepted. I had all kinds of friends who weren't Irish, and we got along great. So this thrust me in a whole new direction out of the Irish world.
But the son Joe Kennedy pinned his hopes on never came back. At 29, he was already positioning himself for a public career, planning one day to be president. He volunteered for a dangerous mission late in the war.
Joe Jr.'s death was the greatest blow that Joe Kennedy had ever suffered. For years afterward, he could never mention his dead son's name without breaking down and crying.
Joe Kennedy turned to his second son, but Jack didn't step forward and volunteer to take his brother's place.
Jack Kennedy was a playboy. Can't put any finer point on it than that. He was a poor student, no particular intellectual interests. He was almost expelled from Choate. Joe Kennedy had to sit down with him and say, listen, Joe's dead. You must carry the family name.
Jack agreed to run for Congress in the old neighborhood where his parents were born. But Joe Kennedy had a problem. His son was more at home at Hyannisport or Palm Beach than in Boston. He knew the nightclubs of New York and London better than the Navy Yard bars of Charlestown.
When Jack was still in the service, The father had come back to the state of Massachusetts. His life was in California and New York. And he came back here for one reason. He came back here to lay the groundwork for the 1946 campaign.
The summer of 1946 proved to be an unbelievable year in Boston. I was a kid, and the guys all came back from the war. I was 11. It sort of stands out to me for several reasons. First of all, the Red Sox had a tremendous team that year. They started fast, they got way out in front, and there was no doubt in anybody's mind in Boston they were going to win the American League, and they won it easy. Also in '46, that was the first time I ever heard of John F. Kennedy. He was running for Congress. It was St. Patrick's Day. And everybody come, all the politicians are in the parade, you see? And most of them come by, and they have a couple of guys on each side, like for security, and they're waving the crowd, and they got the big hats, you know. Up the street comes this guy. I mean, he looked emaciated, and he wasn't that big. And I remember my parents talking about, there's the Kennedy kid, he's a war hero, you know, he's a war hero. And I'm looking at myself, he's got a suit on, he's got nobody around him, he's got no ribbon that says his name, no band in front of him, which was all highly unusual. And that's the first time I was like, I said, boy, is this guy skinny. Of course, I never heard of Kennedy in my life. I was only 10 or 11 years old.
While the Red Sox were winning the pennant, Jack was learning how to be an Irishman.
I want to make one point. Kennedys are not Irish. You know, people like me, Kennedys are Americans. You know, I don't care where their ancestors are from. You know, they didn't grow up in South Boston. They didn't grow up in the way we did. You know, that's not a big deal to us that somebody's a Kennedy.
He needed somebody in the Charlestown district. And somebody said there's a fellow named Dave Powers who calls everyone by their first name. Now, among the Irish, the heart of the home is the kitchen. So if you want to visit, you go up the back stairs. So when he came up the front. And my sister said, it must be a stranger or a bill collector. And it was Jack Kennedy. And the pros were saying, a millionaire son from Harvard won't get 100 votes over here.
The young playboy had his strengths. He had a sense of history, the grit to deal quietly with chronic pain, and he learned fast. He was well on the way toward creating an image of himself that was at odds with the reality. For this cool-eyed young man, campaigning was not a crusade, but a personal adventure. One day, he dove into a crowd of longshoremen leaving the Navy Yard. His father watched from a car across the street.
And they saw John F. Kennedy in the corner in Charlestown shaking hands with guys and talking with them. Joe, initially, the father couldn't believe it. But then he said to himself, this kid's going to do it.
Joe Kennedy masterminded every detail of that election. He was on the phone all day telling people what to do and how to do it.
The Kennedys really invented a new style of political campaigning. And it was identified with class, strangely enough.
People received in the mail handwritten invitations to attend tea with Ambassador and Mrs. Joseph P. Kennedy and the Kennedy family. And they would line up by the thousands at the hotel ballrooms in their finery, these Irish biddies. And as one fellow said, that was all they could do to not curtsy as they were presented to the royal Irish family.
It was a little bit like royalty showing itself. Rose would prefer her gloved hand, and other women would put their gloved hand up to hers.
You know, we have at last arrived. We're at a tea, and we are the guests of the ambassador and his wife, Rose. And then the other thing was, every one of these Irish ladies brought an eligible young daughter, hoping that lightning would strike.
The Kennedys used Jack's tremendous appeal. Whatever it takes, Joe had the cash, and as it turns out, Jack had the talent.
The work of illusion had begun. The ambassador, as he organized his son's rise, gradually retreated from public view. He was working to blot out the past, old Honey Fitz's crooked politics, Joe's own sordid business deals, his appeasement of Nazi Germany. This family's sins weren't going to be put on stage for all to see. With the past receding, Jack Kennedy became pure possibility. It was the future that mattered, not only for Jack. With the educational benefits for GIs, Irish men at last caught up with their womenfolk and fanned out into the larger American world.
We were able to get out of the three-decker and buy a little house, and that was our beginning of the ascent of the crystal stairs into the middle class.
My parents had saved up some money and thought, now we're going to be lace curtain Irish, and we're going to have a bigger home, and we're going to have a lawn. We are going to, this is it, we're going to have a lawn. And to me, it was devastating, because my whole life was there, South Boston. All my teams were there, all my buddies were there. Now they moved me about 5 or 6 miles away. I knew nobody. I shall never forgive that one. I still don't do it to this day.
You started out with the trolley suburbs, and if you really made it, you went all the way down to the Irish Riviera, and you got a beautiful house on the sea or on the country club, and you had made the progression from shanty Irish to lace curtain Irish to the ultimate, which was two-toilet Irish.
As you got older, your life kept on changing, okay? So I moved to Dorchester. It's still Irish. It's a little bit different. You get a bigger house, and people are spread out, and they're not as friendly, And now you go to college, and then you come out, and you get married. Finally, we said, well, where are we going to go? How much are we going to afford? And my wife's aunt had a place in Hanover. I said, Hanover? Get the map. Where's Hanover?
Where we moved, you didn't know many people. You didn't ever expect to know them the same way you knew them in the old neighborhoods.
And all of a sudden, it's like you're not part of the community anymore. The priest wasn't there. 35 guys in the corner right there. Your buddies in the bar room aren't there. The bookie isn't there. If you want to do that, to play that's a whole new world. And what's happened is what we had here in the 40s as part of the Irish culture in Boston isn't there anymore.
In my parents' generation, you wouldn't think of not marrying another Irish Catholic from around the corner or down the street. And it wasn't until my generation that first you had a couple of cousins who would marry Italian Americans, but still Catholic. And then my sister who would marry Protestant. And pretty soon this family that had been brought up by a grandmother who never used the word Protestant without the adjective dirty in front of it was pretty much assimilated.
And it was really one of the things that woke me to trying to figure out what this was all about. Looking back at my own history was the sense it was gone. The parish that I had come out of, where the Monsignor was always Irish and the clergy were always Irish, and you knew what job you were going to go into in the civil service, and your friends would go into a union, it all went away.
It is now my privilege to present to this convention, as a candidate for President of the United States, fellow delegates, I give you the man from Libertyville, Adlai E. Stevenson.
In 1956, I was 9, and my father, who never watched television, rented a television, which to us was a kind of startling event. We figured something extraordinary must be happening. John Kennedy has come to the podium to speak, and I never saw my father cry. But I looked at him and I saw there was a film of water on his eyes, that he was watching this Irishman descended from famine immigrants, as my father was, and it was a kind of religious moment for him.
Now grab your coat and snatch your hat, leave your worries on the doorstep, just direct your feet to the sunny side of the street.
The campaign of 1960 was for many Irish a day at the movies. Kennedy gripped the imagination. He was not like them, but was, in their fantasies, what they could hope to be.
Sunny side of the street.
He had a hipper, cooler life than people thought Irish Catholics had, than Irish Catholics thought they had. He really cared about how his suits were cut. He cared a lot about how he looked, and he enjoyed it that he and his family were sort of portrayed as movie stars.
If I never had a cent, I'll be rich as Rockefeller.
He was protected by artful public relations. His friends, aides, the newsmen around him knew an often dark and reckless man. But in the flickering public image, there was no dark side.
I remember in 1960 waiting with thousands of people to see Kennedy show up. And they were Jews and Italians and hordes of Irish. And he came over a hill, and he was on the back of an open limousine, tan in November in the Bronx. Thinking back, I think the Aztec scene Cortez or something. This was not a human figure we were seeing. And at first there was a kind of shocked silence when people saw him. They couldn't even cheer because they were so just taken with his physical presence. This was not somebody who appeared to be mortal the way we were mortal.
Over the centuries, Irish storytellers had looked forward to a hero who would be their deliverer. To the emerging Irish Americans, fast losing a sense of who they were, Kennedy became that hero. By most measures of American success, money, schooling, social status, Irish Catholics were, by 1960, pulling ahead of the WASPs. They became fully American. They believed in the future.
In one of the most strenuously contested election battles in the nation's history, the Kennedy column recorded an electoral vote frustratingly short of the 260.
Basically, a lot of ways, Irish people are cynical anyhow. You say something bad's going to happen. Yeah. Like, why is it Murphy's Law? Why isn't it Angelo's Law or Pierre's Law? It's Murphy's Law. Whatever's going to go wrong is going to go wrong, right? Basically. And everybody says, nah. And it was like, we were right there, boy. This is it. It's like the Red Sox. He's going to lose by 0.5 point.
In Mr. Kennedy's first public appearance after his election, accompanied by his wife Jacqueline, his father, financier Joseph Kennedy, makes his first appearance since the campaign began.
I don't think anybody believed he was going to win in Boston or in South Boston. And then, of course, when he won, they didn't care how he did it or whose money he did it with. It was just that he's the president of the United States, and he's from here, and he's Irish, and he's Catholic.
The good news was the Irish Catholics had arrived. The bad news was he was a Protestant from Harvard. You know? So, and that was fine with us. You know, Al Smith, when he ran for president in 1928, he was this little cigar-chomping Irishman from New York in a little brown derby. And he looked like a product of a big ethnic city machine, which is what, in part, he was. But this guy in 1960, he was like a big, white-teeth, full-jawed American. John Kennedy helped change our image of ourselves. I think we lost a lot of our Irishness after Kennedy.
If there was nothing holding the Irish back from the White House, there was nothing holding the Irish back from anything in American life. I think one of the real things that changed with Kennedy's election is the sense that the enemy was gone. What keeps an immigrant group together is not so much self-love, but fear of its enemies. And when the enemies go away, the need for cohesion, the need for holding together kind of goes away.
Of course, there would be more enemies, old and new. Londoners would feel the impact of bombs paid for by Irish America. Blacks would feel Irish anger when they moved into Irish neighborhoods. But there would be no turning back from the Kennedy years. The gates had been opened and would remain open. The Irish could go where they would.
you lean on your history and you lean on the history that's behind your history. You know, it's like you can't do it alone. And my granddaughter lives next door, and she'll know that she came from a town where her family has lived since 1834. So that's about 7 generations. And if she does have an identity crisis when she's 21, which seems to be an obligatory rite of passage for Americans, she'll know that at her back is Irish culture to brace her.
We're here now. My mother was here. My father came from there. But where did I come from? Did I come from a farm in Roscommon? Was my grandfather a herder? Was he a sheep herder? I want to know that. It's very important to me. Before I die, I want to know where I came from.
In 1994, I went over to Ireland with my wife, and I said, I'd like to go to Galway, where my mother and father were from. And my parents, I had sort of always picked up, said they were like farmers. So I was telling my wife, yeah, my parents, they're farmers. So we drove up about 15 miles to rent a car, and they had 2 little signs, Carrow, Rossaville. I said, here it is. She looked around and she said, what did they do, farm rocks? Because you didn't see one blade of grass. You didn't see one tree. I mean, all they were these rolling fields with nothing in there but big rocks and fences. And then all of a sudden, it sort of come back to me what my mother had told me about never having shoes until she was 13 and having to walk 3 or 4 miles to the next town to school and stuff like that in the winter. And that's when I realized how tough it had been. I never had given it much thought, you know, because I was always say, hey, like, I'm an American.
But it was a great victory. This is what they came here for. They didn't come to stay together as Irish Americans. They came to find something else. And in the end, for better or for worse, whether it's a long day's journey into night or a long night's journey into day, they found what they were looking for.
Another sapling is grown, then I could believe that I'm bound to find a better life than I left behind. But as you ascend the ladder, look out below you tread, for the colors bled as they overflow. Red, white, and blue, green, white, and gold. So I had to leave for my country of birth. As for each child grown tall, another lies in the earth, and for every rail we laid in the loam, there's 1,000 miles of the long journey home.
Major funding for this program was provided by Jefferson Smurfit Corporation. Around the world, we're known for our paper, paperboard and packaging products, and paper recycling. We are proud of our Irish heritage through our association with Jefferson Smurfit Group.
Funding for this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by annual financial support from viewers like you.
This is PBS.